Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience while we got things moved around and set up. This has been an interesting several months. We started this process in, well, you'll see as we start through this. I actually started this process and thinking about this process in December and before of last year. So it's year before last, yes. Yes, true. December of 2020. And we've come a long ways, but we aren't there yet. So if I can make this work. That was obviously the wrong button. No, you got it. That was it. Thanks, Ed. Oh, okay. So, aside from the search committee and the elders, can anybody tell me what that number represents? That's a revision number, isn't it? It is close to that number, yes, but that's not what this number is intended to represent. That number is the number of days between today and August 1st, which is pastor's intended retirement date. That's how many days we have to identify, call, and receive a new pastor to be on board before pastor retires or as pastor retires. The hope is that the new pastor's first day on the job will also be Pastor Bob's last day on the job with a smooth transition. If you haven't gotten them, on the table back there are 4 documents: a church profile, a community profile, a pastoral profile, and a declaration of faith. These are the 4 documents. Obviously, the declaration of faith is part of our Constitution, and it, along with the other 3 documents that have been created by the search committee, are the documents that we will be using to solicit resumes, and the pastoral profile and the articles of the declaration of faith will be the documents that we will use to evaluate the pastor that has applied, the pastors that apply for potentially calling one of them to be our pastor. Several years ago, Pastor Bob and I had a conversation regarding what's going to happen when he retires. And I started that conversation, by the way. You did, yes, you did start that conversation. And I expressed then my willingness to be part of the process to find a new pastor. In December 2020, Pastor decided to set a date, that date being August 1st, and we began the process. In March of 2021, I made a presentation to the elder board and asked them to appoint me as the chairman of the search committee. Along with that, I asked Daryl and Pat to join me as the 3 elders on the search committee. CV Northwest has produced a 133-page document that is the CV Northwest search process. But it's designed to answer the questions of every, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll come back to that in just a minute. The elders approved that request and approved the request for a search committee of 3 elders and 7 members. Sorry, I'm not used to looking over my shoulder. I'm used to looking at my computer when the screen's going off behind me. The goal of the elder board was to establish a search committee which would represent the congregation in the search process. To do that, we needed members that were spiritually mature, that represented a good doctrinal cross-section of our congregation. As you know, our congregation has a very wide spectrum in doctrinal perspectives. And represented a good age cross-section of the congregation. We identified potential members of the committee, and as you'll remember, we came and asked for a vote of affirmation from you to agree with the to who the search committee was, and this was the search committee that was chosen. As a search committee, several things began to come into focus. It's the conviction of the search committee that we are not just seeking a candidate to be the next leader of Cottage Grove Bible Church. We are seeking a specific individual that God is preparing to be that person. This process needs to be covered in prayer, both individually and corporately. As such, we as a committee have agreed to be in prayer individually for the process, and we start each committee meeting with a time of prayer corporately as a committee before we start our discussions. And we want to ask each of you to join us in that prayer for the right individual that God's preparing. But beginning next week, I believe, our bulletin should have a space in it that looks something like this, that tells you how the search committee is praying that week and asks you to join us in praying that for the following week. This will allow us to pray together as a congregation with the same goal. I want to make a couple of comments about our search committee. We achieved our goals to create a search committee that was diverse both in doctrinal viewpoints and in age. As such, one would think that we might have some contention in the search committee. We have not. We've had discussions. We've had lively discussions. But Nobody's gotten aggravated. Nobody's gotten mad. Nobody's gotten up and left. And this search committee has come together to seek the Lord's leading in this decision far better than I ever imagined it could. And I want to thank them for that. It has been an amazing process. Second, we knew that going into this process, there was a possibility that all of the members of the committee might not be able to continue through the entire process. We have 2 members from the committee that, because of time and job situations, they have, at least temporarily, stepped away from our weekly meetings. Those people are yeah, I could turn around and look. Bob Lindsay and Jeff Roeder. I want to thank both of them for their time and energy in this committee. And as the time becomes available, if they are available to come back, step back into the process, we would love to have them. All right. See, these buttons are new things to me. I use my computer to advance the slide. So right now I want to go through, hopefully, quickly, briefly, the process that we've followed to get to where we are right now. We started with that 133-page document that I talked about. And it's a general process. The first thing we did was we customized this process to be a Cottage Grove Bible process. We streamlined it. A lot of it we look to for reference, but is not typically part of our process. Overall, the process was planned. We began to develop the candidate criteria. We flailed around a lot, I suppose, in the first few weeks, looking for the right way to develop the candidate criteria. We started with a questionnaire from that 133-page document. Each committee member was asked to answer the questionnaire, and it does say it. And each elder was asked to answer the questionnaire. By aggregating those answers, we created a rough profile of a potential candidate. Those questions included doctrinal questions, they included ministry styles, they included questions regarding the individual's approach to counseling, the individual's approach to preaching, a wide variety of questions. From that starting point, we developed a rather analytical list of attributes of potential candidates. From this list, we discussed 2 things. How to change that analytical list into a narrative form. This document that you have in front of you that's called the Pastoral Profile is a document that's been through, we went through probably 5 revisions before we started putting revision numbers on it. The highest revision number we directly got to was revision 13. It's probably had at least 20 revisions of all of it or bits and pieces of it as we've moved through this process. we quickly realized that we needed a specific approach as to how to put this document together. We explored creating a list of non-negotiables. What were the things that we absolutely had to have in a pastor? Then we realized that most of those non-negotiables were already listed in our doctrinal statement. This statement right here, our doctrinal statement in our Constitution, is the guiding principles of our church. Answered many of those non-negotiables. We realized finally that we needed to address in this document things that weren't addressed other places. When a candidate files an application with CV Northwest, they fill out an 8-page application. And it covers their doctrinal beliefs, it covers their previous ministries, it covers a lot of things that we would normally be looking for anyway in a candidate. So we started writing and looking at this extensive resume that we would get on each candidate and realized that the things that weren't included in other documents were things like the character of the individual, things like how the individual interacts with his congregation. Those are important things for a pastor, but it's not covered in most documents. How the individual interacts with his family. What's his family like? The individual's approach to counseling. The overall philosophy of ministry of the candidate. These concepts are important in identifying a good fit between a congregation and a pastor. The documents you have in front of you are a package of documents that will all work in conjunction to help CV Northwest, first of all, CV Northwest, find resumes that they have in their hand already. And as we get other resumes outside of those from CV Northwest, it will help us analyze how all of these fit together and find the candidate that's being prepared. These documents have been sent as preliminary to CV Northwest so they can begin to evaluate what applications they have on file that they can send us. Especially the statement of faith and the pastoral profile will allow us to create interview questions so that we are asking all of the candidates similar questions to be able to balance those interviews across all of the candidates that we get. As you read those documents, remember the primary purpose of expending the time and energy in creating them is threefold. Create a standard to evaluate each candidate, establish a list of qualities we believe will be a good fit for our congregation, and enable us to create interview questions that provide that data. Where do we go from here? As I said a second ago, we've provided CV Northwest with these 4 documents as preliminary. We didn't want to make them final until after we had a chance to share them with you. The search committee is currently writing questions based on these documents that will be asked of every candidate. When the committee has narrowed the list of candidates to the most likely 3 to 5, we will use the following process. Evaluate candidates based on sermons and other teaching they have made available online. Evaluate candidates based on interviews. Observe them in their current ministry if possible. Regarding interviews, our plan is to start with a 3-interview process. We would prefer to conduct our interviews in person if the location of the pastor makes that available. Obviously, if they're on the East Coast, we're not all going to fly to the East Coast to do that. But if they're local enough, if they're near enough, we would like to conduct our interviews that way.
Your battery's about to run out, and do you have a power supply?
Yes, in that, is my case not back there?
No.
Teresa, is my case by you? That's probably why the slide isn't advancing. Thank you, Tim. Just advance that with the down arrow another spot. Okay. In person would be our preference. Over Zoom or other video conference method would be the next one. Oh, there we go. The least desirable would be an old-fashioned telephone interview. If we have to, we'll resort to that. We plan to conduct 3 interviews with each candidate as necessary, and the process will be, the first interview will focus on general background, on schooling, on ministry experience, their walk with God, the call to ministry, their specific doctrinal questions based on the doctrinal beliefs provided in their resume. Those are the general things that we will focus on in the first interview. In a second interview, we'll focus on ideas and concepts that are in our pastoral profile and any follow-up questions that we have from the first interview. At that time, we will ask permission to contact their references. Technically, because they've included their references in their resume and their application to CV Northwest, technically, their references, they've already given that permission, but we feel that it's appropriate to tell them that we're going to start contacting their references at that point. The third interview will focus on follow-up from our previous interviews and asking any questions that they have of us. Our general consensus is by the time we get to a third interview, we probably have a pretty good idea how far we want to proceed with this given candidate. Other interviews, however, will be conducted as necessary. The search committee will identify one candidate that we unanimously approve as the candidate to lead CGBC. We will then recommend to the elders that candidate with the data as to why we're recommending that specific candidate. The elders can choose a variety of options at that point. They can conduct an interview with the elders and the candidate, just with the elders. They could conduct an interview with the elders and the search committee and the candidate. They could schedule a candidate weekend for the church to meet the candidate. We haven't really discussed that with the elders yet, how the elders want to proceed from this point once we recommend a candidate. We'll get to that, but we aren't there yet. You may be asking, when do I get to ask questions of the candidate? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's the next point. The most common process for calling a pastor in most churches is the search committee will identify a candidate they believe is the proper selection for the church. The search committee will recommend that to the elder board. The elder board will conduct their own interview if necessary, their own take on what that recommendation is. And then at the appropriate time, the elder board and the search committee together will invite the candidate to spend a weekend at the church candidating for the position. That candidate weekend may include some of the following, and again, we haven't gotten here yet, but it could mean a Friday night potluck, a Saturday morning men's breakfast, or Saturday morning breakfast in general, a Sunday afternoon luncheon, a Saturday evening dinner with the elders, a Sunday school hour to have an interchange of ideas with the candidate, and always a sermon on Sunday morning. All of those things are open, or other things as we think about what we need to learn from a candidate. The bottom line is there will be opportunity at that point for the congregation to interact with the candidate and to have that discussion, ask them questions directly, and evaluate the candidate on their own. At the end of the candidate weekend, there'll be a time of discussion regarding extending a call to the candidate. The final step in this process will be for the elders to formally recommend a candidate to the congregation. At that time, a congregational vote will be taken to accept the recommendation of the elders and extend a call to the candidate. Now it's time for you to talk to us. If you have any questions regarding the process that we are following or that I've outlined here, please feel free to ask them, and we'll do our best to announce them. Tim, how do we handle the microphone for those that are online with us? Okay. So if you have a question, Teresa, my cell phone is there in the pew in the rack in front of you. Michael, can you field texts that come in from those online? Okay, can you give my phone to Michael? Open messages. Okay.
I don't get to snoop through your phone?
What?
You don't get to snoop through your phone?
He wants to snoop.
No. Okay.
You want to give me your phone number?
I will do that, yes. If you're participating online, please text your questions to 541-335-1858, and Michael will see that those questions are asked If you're here, someone will bring you a microphone so that you can ask your questions, and the microphone so that the people that are listening online can also hear your question. Okay. Questions, comments regarding our process that we've gone through? Back there.
I have a couple of questions on age. If you decided on what age would be eligible for that?
In our pastoral profile, we have designated our age of between 30 and 40. Now, having said that, I want to make a comment here, and that is that this pastoral profile is, as best we understand, the ideal candidate. However, there is none of this that is written in stone. And if a candidate comes along, let's say that is 50, but everything else in our profile, everything else that we would like to see, because they're 50, it doesn't mean we will eliminate them from the possibility. So, yes, our target age is 30 to 40, but I want to emphasize that's not necessarily an absolute. It's who we would look at first, but that may change. Did that answer your question?
Yes. The next one is, when I go to Amazon, I always, when I buy a product, I look at reviews, because that tells you an awful lot, negative plus positive kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be nice to ask some of the people that are around him, if they are in a pastoral position, to ask, what is it you don't like about him, and what is it you do like about him? Maybe you could interview some people that might give you a better idea of his past history, how he feels, how he treats other people, negative and positive kind of things. That could add into the format as far as picking the right person for this.
One of the things that we intend to do is we intend to interview, of course, the references that they have included in their resumes. But then from that, we are going to ask those references for other references, a second tier of references. We will tell the candidate we're doing that, but we're not going to ask the candidate to give us those references. We're going to ask their references to give us those references. There are also many ministerial societies that they may be a part of, that if we can find those, we may be able to take advantage of asking some of those questions.
We got a message. Will the congregation get to interact with the 3 to 5 top candidates, or just the one?
The plan at this point is just the one, and the reason for that is because the putting on a candidate weekend and asking a candidate to come and candidate is an expensive and time-consuming process, both for the candidate and for the church. So the goal is to take that down to one candidate before we make that recommendation to the church. What happens if we can't decide between 2 candidates? Then we're going to have to go to the elder board to determine what that process should be. At this point, our goal is to narrow it down to one candidate to recommend to the elder board. Any other questions regarding our process? Wow. Either we've done a very good job or you're all asleep, because I expected lots more questions. Michael, or Daryl is bringing yeah.
Just to say that we have been praying for you, and we're trusting that God is guiding you. You know so much more about the people you've looked at than we would.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We trust that we are listening to the Lord. Any other questions regarding our process? Okay, let's move on to the content. Yep.
We do have, you know.
Oh.
Yeah, well.
Well,
Do you want me to give it to him?
I guess he's still the pastor, at least for a while.
When it comes to that pastoral weekend, everybody will be able to ask any question they want of the candidate. That's also a weekend I won't be here.
Yes.
Because I want everything to be free and easy to ask and discuss.
Any other questions, Michael, from online? Okay. Vonnie?
Well, we've been on a search committee before, and it wasn't real easy. So I thank all of you who are on there. But I just want to know, the person that you're going to recommend to come here to do the in-person congregation
Right.
meeting, is that going to require everyone on the search committee to be in unity?
We will, when we recommend a candidate to the elder board, our intention is to do that in unanimity. I was going to say something. Oh, what Vonnie said. Vonnie is right. I've been on 2 search committees before in a previous church. And I have to say that both of them were long, grueling, difficult times. And I am thankful for this process that CV Northwest has created. We've been able to take that process, narrow it down to a process that made a lot more sense, but still gives us a direction and a way to analyze where we're going and what we're doing. When I was on search committees before, we didn't have any documents like this that said, this is what we're looking for. We were handed a name and a telephone number and a resume and say, call this guy and see what you think. That's what we're trying to avoid. And so far, I think we've done a reasonable job of creating a process that is well-directed. Any other questions regarding our process? Okay, the next one's a little more difficult. If you have questions regarding the content of the 3 documents, you actually have 4 documents, but of the 3 documents, the pastoral profile, the community profile, or the church profile, please feel free to write those questions down. There is a sheet of paper attached to the back of the pastoral profile, and write your questions on that. Include your name and your email address so that we can get back to you with those, to answer those questions. And we will consider those. I'm going to ask that you hand that to any member of the search committee as you leave, or you can get it to us later. If you're going to get it to us later, I would prefer that you email it to us. That's my email address, johnKsearch@protonmail.com. That's an address that I've created specifically for this process. Okay. Michael, you gave me the phone back too soon. Oh. We have another question from online.
Will the visiting candidate bring his wife and family and/or family?
We will request that the visiting candidate bring their wife and family, yes. We consider the candidate weekend to be a family event, not just the candidate. Okay, so the content of the document, please write your questions. That allows us to look them over. If possible, submit your questions by 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the 5th. That allows us to go over those questions at our meeting on the 6th and determine what to do with those questions. Do you have another comment, Pastor? You know, that's the way with pastors. They always have another comment.
For the people who are online, can they request from that same email the documents?
They can, and I was going to get to that, but that's good. Thank you. Yes, if you are online and want these documents, which it would be hard to comment on the content of the documents without the document, please send an email to that address, and I will send you that document out as soon as I get the email. We will respond to you by email no later than January 14th, if we get those questions by the 5th. That is our presentation as far as it goes. Are there any other questions that I can answer at this point? Okay. Daryl, would you return thanks for the food we're going to partake here soon? And we'll be dismissed to have some time of fellowship. And feel free to talk to the search committee and ask them questions.
Let's pray for the food. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to fellowship together. And please, if anybody has a question that comes to mind, please seek out one of the search committee members and feel free to ask. May the food we're about to partake be a blessing to us and bless the hands of the people that prepared it. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Thank you. John K. Search at
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. John K. Search at protonmail.com. Is this still on? It's online there.